I want to thank Hans for inviting us out to this, and thank y'all for having us. I guess I'll start with about 7 years ago. Well, it was farther back than that, really, for a vacation Bible school. We wanted to do something for the kids in the classes, and we come up with something like this. It was a little bit different shape, but we made the kids in the Bible school want a musical instrument, and then throughout the week during the lesson music portion of the class, we taught them how to play it. Then on the Friday night, they played them in front of the church. And so I wanted to come up with something that's kind of inexpensive, because when you're making something for a bunch of kids, if you're making $100, $200 instruments, it adds up. But this is one of the first pans that I did, and this is a copper pan here. And one of my favorite things to do is go to flea markets and thrift stores, and when I see an interesting pan, I'm like, okay, I can. That's the next pan joke that I'm gonna do.
And why do you call them pan? Why do you do pan jokes?
Well, a pan, of course. But when I play them, they have a sort of a banjo kind of sound.
But you also didn't like to condone smoking either. That's a good option.
Right. Also, at these flea markets and craft shows and stuff, sometimes I see cigar box guitars, and they're around $70, $80, $100, $150, and those are really interesting. But I wanted to do something that didn't. You a cigar smoker?
That's just the box.
But it was just, like I said, it was a cigar box and it has a neck on it. But anyway, I made a couple of those. And like I said, I didn't really want to promote smoking. So I was like, I'm going to do something else. I've always, from a kid, always liked taking cardboard boxes and trying to make something out of them with rubber bands and just that. So I'm going to start off by kind of playing you something, because I've done some craft shows in the past year, a couple, and one thing, when people see them hanging up, I'll start to play it, and they say, oh, they play. They think they're kind of just for looks. And if they're just for looks, that'd be a lot easier to make. The hardest part of the whole process is getting them where the notes are clear and the actual playing part. And what I do, Hans has the dulcimers over here. And do we have any musicians in the crowd? Well, if you have like if you teach, I teach guitar, and a guitar has like 21 frets on it. And there's a thing called the chromatic scale, where it goes into, dun, 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 it goes all the way up to 12 notes, and then it kind of repeats over. Well, with the dulcimers, it kind of does the major scale. It leaves out like 5 of those 12 notes and just has seven notes. And like Hans's dulcimers there, when you go to pick out a tune, you can find the tune easier by having some of those notes taken away. Like if you're in it, like most time, Hans, they're in the key of D. A dulcimer is most of the time. So I still stayed in D, but the frets, and we're going to break this down. But the frets, if you notice, there are some frets here that.
Buzz is going to get us closer.
Okay, that are wide, then a little bit narrow, wide, and then narrow again. And people say, well, is it just kind of a random thing? But if you notice, at one time on this one, I had put the extra frets in there just to see if you can kind of see an outline where I used to have frets in there. So they would be evenly spaced if I left that fret in. And so they're tuned like to a D, A, D. And a lot of times instruments will have a sound hole on top of them. I experimented with putting different sound holes and stuff on top. Didn't really change the sound. A lot of times it would make it even weaker sounding. What I do now is when I go into the banjo with the neck or the pan, I leave an extra space here and enough sound gets out there.
Wait, he's doing that. I'm going to let this one, and we can pass it around. You kind of look at it.
Okay, so like I said, basically you can find music online, like any dulcimer music will work with this. It's not a tuning that I just came up with, it's just a miniature version of what Hans has here with the dulcimers. And a lot of times people start off playing them where it's just a simple tunes like. And then if you use some of the other strings, you have chords or strumming.
I can do the one piece. I can't do that.
So, like, oh, thank you.
They are playable instruments.
So they're playable, and like I said, when the couple of craft shows I've done, I have music available that you can learn how to play them. But we're going to talk about some of these other ones in just a second. But what I do is to start off with the neck. Here is kind of a finished neck. Like I said, of course, this is the hardest part of it. That has to be the most precise part of it. Ethan, in just a second, is going to be putting, as we go through the steps, is going to be putting one together here. I mainly use cedar wood just because I'm not a great wood finisher as far as different finishes and stuff. And the cedar wood is kind of, I put some little oil. A lot of times I wind up putting like cooking oil or mineral oil or something that just kind of darkens it up. When I first started doing them, I would buy like the cedar planks like this. I think this is 5/8 thick. And then, I'd set a saw and just come up with the strip. The strip is 23 inches long. Now this whole scale, if y'all seen a mandolin, you might be familiar, it's a little smaller instrument. It's the same length basically as a mandolin is. And if you had a mandolin and you were take these frets out, basically it's the same place where a mandolin frets are. So I would take this, and when I very first started making these, I would take the keys. Do you have a set of keys over there? Let me see that set of keys. And put them on here, and then just try to run the string. And I just never could get any sound. So when the keys are going on here, it needs something for the fretboard. There you go. And using the little 3/16 plywood, and I was going to show you here, a lot of times what I'll buy is just a basic, this is underlayment here, as you see there. And then instead of I oil this here, it darkens up nice, and over time just gets darker. And coming 5 inches down from the top, I would glue these on, and that'd be the beginning of it there. Nowadays, since I was doing the craft shows, I'm doing more. So I would just cut out these and glue on the fretboard there. And once I've got that glued on and it sets up, and then I set my saw, and it just cuts it all together there, and I don't have to worry about, just messing with these separate. I just come out with this right here, like I said, with the 5 inches there. This fretboard is 9 inches long, and I have in part of the kits that we have to make your own, it has all the dimensions in there, and then this is approximately 9 inches at the end here. This can vary. As you notice, I'm using for this a cake pan, and recently I've found some cake pans at Walmart for 88 cents that work real well. They're not the real flimsy ones, but they're pretty sturdy. So as far as with the pan, what I'll do, if you notice that I'll kind of mark a spot, you mark, and I cut this out. Well, what I do is I cut this with a like an angle little we got the little, yeah, no, with just the angle, yeah, anyway, whatever, and then just have it there, and this would go in there like this. Now I make them with different kind of pans and stuff, and where the only difference you do if you had a smaller pan, if you notice this pan right here is a very small pan. So let me see it up here. The sound doesn't resonate as much, but it's like that. But anyway, the plans are based really on the 9 inch. So once I've got that there, and then using a sander, well, I start off using a router, but you can, on any saw, really just kind of make a contour on the back, and I just sand it kind of smooth. Now, one of the trickiest parts is these holes for the keys. Let me see these keys again. You can use a template right here. These holes, when they drill them, they have to be
right there. He'll go in.
Okay. They go. You lay that on there. I guess you could tape it on there, glue it on there, and just drill. It's a 1/4 inch hole that drills in there, and if the bit has to be a 1/4 inch, because what happens on these keys, I don't know if you've ever seen these broke down, but you have this gear in the post, and when it goes up through that hole, if your hole is a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch, when you put the string on, it will pull this key gear away from that turner. I mean, so it has to be precise, and I said, to the years experimenting with this, I've try to be more careful. Like I said, I do the hole. And also, let me see if I've got it here. Recently, I purchased a jig where I clamp it on there, and then just using the drill, just kind of, and it just works good that way, and it gets them perfect where they need to be.
He's also making a lot of
Yeah, like I said, this here, they're proud of these. I ordered this offline. Is around a $30 item. But like I said, if you're just making a few of these, this template works fine. And then also, so anyway, once I have these cut, Ethan is going to demonstrate the fret work. Now, anybody know what frets are usually made of? What kind of material?
Brass.
A lot of the old instruments were brass. Then they got into steel, so it's just basically metal frets. And the way a fret works is you have
You got to draw. You got a board behind you if you want to draw.
Okay. A fret usually works where you have, it's like round like that, and then there's a slot that comes down. Let me do it bigger here. Then a slot that comes down, and you have a long roll of it, and then you have to cut it. You cut a slot in the wood, and then the fret goes down in there, and of course you glue it in, and then once it dries, you have to crown the fret. As far as the frets are kind of squared off a little bit like that, so you have to take a file and file this off, because when you're sliding your fingers across the frets, if you have that sharp point there, it kind of stops. Well, when we were doing for Vacation Bible School, you know, when I was doing all those instruments, the metal, that was just going to be too time consuming. So I came up with using flat toothpicks for the frets. I started off using the round toothpicks, thinking that your fingers would glide across easily, but they were too high. So the flat ones work. But if you notice on this flat, let's see, I don't know if it is on in here, they have an edge on them where it's kind of squared off. Once we glue these down, then I use a Dremel, which I'll be showing you that, to kind of round off that edge, so when you're sliding your fingers across, your fingers will slide easily across there.
Are those tapered?
The picks, they are. And what I do is when we're gluing these on, you have on this dulcimer or the banjo, you have the largest string is on top. Then you have the next, and then the smallest is on the bottom. So when I glue this on, also on these toothpicks, I don't know if y'all ever studied toothpicks.
I'll pass one around.
Y'all can keep these too.
Copy to use.
But they have this end, the big part here, it tapers almost down to nothing. So when we're gluing these on, that big part there, I let it stick above that a little bit, and so it gets the same thickness already. And he mentioned the tapering off. Since we have the bass string on top, it catches the wider, and then as it goes down, it just catches, you know. So I guess somebody might could look at it and say, well, you know, you've got it kind of angled down, but really when you kind of file them, you really can't tell. And another question might be like, well, how long are toothpicks can they really last? I made this banjo 7 years ago, and these toothpicks that I have on here are the same toothpicks I did 7 years ago. And I teach guitar, and a lot of times in the lessons we will use this a little bit, and I have students that play with it. In the 7 years, I've never had to change one as far as them wearing out.
You coat them somehow?
Now I use the wood glue, and I don't know if the glue kind of makes them thicker or what, but time you put that little round curve over the top of them, it doesn't seem like that something this flimsy, you know, could hold up, but they do. So also in the packet that we have, I've included a few toothpicks in there. They have to be the flat ones. But anyway, Ethan, if you notice right here, and also Hans can tell you about this, when you put a lot of people that don't play, they think those frets are kind of like, you stick them on there and it's kind of a random thing. But it is a precise, it has to be right in the right spot, or no matter how you tune it, it will never play right. If you notice on this template here, you'll see the wide, the little bit smaller, wide, and a little bit smaller. And you can cut this out and glue it. Like I said, you'll just have it on the top of that right there, or just kind of hold it aside and you kind of mark that, and then using a square or something, just kind of make sure they're, you know, straight. Now Ethan's, now so like I said, since I make more than one at a time, I've got this little, like I said, it's just very elementary here, but the little jig set up to where I just set it in there, and then I glued the toothpicks across through there like that. So Ethan's gonna go ahead and start gluing that up, and like I said, we'll put some glue on there, and he kind of just puts a toothpick in it and glues it on. And a little bit of what he's going to come up with is I just use another piece of this wood and clamp those into place.
Where's the finished one, Russ?
So I'll take this off. Oh yeah, there's one other thing here. If you notice right here, this little part is called the nut. That when the strings come back across here, it's going to go through. Notice this one doesn't have the slots cut out yet, but it's going to go through the slots here and run over to the keys.
And that's what raises it up?
That's what raises it up. And notice on this, I have a fret right there at the nut. A lot of time guitars, they won't have what they call a 0 fret, because this is first fret, second, and all the way down to 7th fret. Well, I like a 0 fret here because when you're cutting this slot, you can cut that slot right down to the top of that toothpick right there. Without that toothpick, there would be, you could get it too low, to where if you was to cut the slot all the way down to the top of that wood right there, it would fret out. You couldn't get no sound out of it. So that enough with the flat toothpick, that enough height, and then you have a bridge that's going to be in the back, raises it up enough. So I said, there we have what Ethan's working on there with the frets. And this is the bridge right here. So what's going to happen here, and like I said, as we go along, we're going to put one together. As we go along, from here to here is like 7 1/4 inches. And this is going to be, from here to here is like another 7 1/4. And this can vary some, but really, time it's all said and done, from here to the bridge, it's 13 3/4.
That's what makes it that distance right there. See, the pan can be any size.
Right, right. So if you have a smaller pan, this is going to be probably closer in here, like where it can vary at. Now, if this is out of line, now this is something with nature. This is amazing how this works to me. But if you go right to the center of this and barely touch it, you hear it like if I do this, if I'm barely touching it here, it doesn't do anything. But right in the exact center of this, it'll like chime. And that's one way to tell if I had this bridge in a different spot. Notice it's going to chime in a different place, and that's, so if I had it here, it chimes there. So if you did have one where you had it this scale here, these frets would have to be in a different place, because you know that chime has to be right in the middle. All right, so let me put this back here. All right, so what I do with the little nut here, I cut a little piece of wood out that's square, goes on there, and I cut a little bit higher than what the pick is. I mean, the toothpick is there. And usually I just rubber band these. Let me get those close up here. Now you can use these emery boards. I'm going to show you, like if you want to zoom in here on these. Now, if I run my, let me finish chipping that off that there.
He neatly takes them off, you notice that?
Neatly, well, it's gonna be all filed down, so. So like I said, it's kind of squared off here. So I want that to be, like if I was running my fingers across this, it catches on there. So what we want to do is have where you're filing that on each side, and also filing the ends down where they're even with that. Now if you're using this, it takes a good while. So that's why now I use just a little grinding wheel or sanding I use to, go through there with a Dremel, and I can do it much faster. Now the slots here, I'll just use my Dremel again with a little cutoff wheel, and just, they have to be a certain spot, which I have a template for that showing where those slots need to be. And also on the bridge, they're a little bit wider, because as these strings go down, they start off here and they're just getting a little bit wider as they go down, and that allows your pick to have more room to go in there. All right. So Ethan's got that glued up there. Now the top here, using that underlayment material, I usually start off with a 10. This is 9-inch pan. I usually start off with just cutting a block out. Now you can take the pan and whatever size you're using, just put it on here, and using your scroll saw.
Hey, I got it in there.
Yeah. You can, just like so you're tracing out whatever size the pan is. So that's what I would cut out. And when it comes time to fasten this onto the top, you're going to have a...
Answer question.
Just a curiosity question. Could you do it and not cut that off? Would it make any difference in the sound?
You mean just leave it like this?
Just leave it, if you decided as a design.
No, it sure wouldn't as far as that goes, because you still basically have the sound coming out right there. So like I said, you could have it where it's a square, which sometimes I buy square pans. I don't know if y'all ever heard of Bo Diddley before, that use a square guitar. The square pans, they look, and everybody will say, hey, that's a...
Would be the square.
Yeah, they said...
More heavy metal.
Does the thickness of that affect the sound?
Yeah, if you was to use like this 5/8 material here, it would be just deader than a doorknob. I mean, it just wouldn't have no sound at all. And if you use too thin, just the weight of the strings, everything would just be would collapse in. Like,
10 letters too. 15 letters.
oh yeah, the tin itself, it changes the sound. Like this copper, I found is the best sounding material you can get. But usually when you find the copper pans, we were in Franklin,
For $30.
North Carolina a while back, and they were selling their pans for like $25, $30 a piece with the copper pans. And I was like, well, if I'm at a craft show selling them for $30 and $35, I really can't come out on that.
But if your wife's missing a few copper pans in the next few weeks,
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, once I get this cut out, what's that? You have a question?
I noticed on the edges of the wood around the top of the pan, there's a little wrinkle in there. Does it make any difference about that or what?
You talking about in this?
No, when you
No,
put the
when you
board
cast
down, there's a lift in the edge of that board because it's not completely flat on that one you got right there.
Right. No, when you go, like I said, if you notice here, the top is screwed down with these 4 screws here. And then also the strings are running through the hose in the back here. So time you have the pressure of these screws and plus the pressure of that strings back here, it's pretty well flat.
plus that bar, plus the bar going through.
Right, that's one thing.
You
As
got two more screws on that, which kind of flattens that whole thing out.
yeah, so Ethan, if you want to go ahead and start just putting together this one, and I'll let you have this pen back here. Okay. All right. So, like I said, this is going to run through that, and usually what I'll do is I'll take and fasten this. It would go on top like this. And notice you always want to get a pan that has a little lip there, because if you had just like it's a frying pan or something that was just straight off, it's much hard. Well, you'd have to attach it a different way. I've thought about where putting a little block inside and putting screws here and then screwing through the top here. But it's just easier with a little lip here. You can drill your hose there, drill your hose there, and like I said, you're going to have that fastened on. And usually I just will put some oil on that. Here recently, when we were doing our last craft show, we wanted to do some different kind of things with paint and stuff. And here's something with basically Elmer's glue and acrylic paint. I don't know if y'all ever tried the crackling effect, but I bought some little crackling, but it's kind of expensive. So what I did is I read on the internet where you do like a little base coat, let that dry, and then put some Elmer's glue, kind of let that get tacky, and then you paint over top of it, and as that's drying, or use a hair dryer on it, it will create a cracked finish. So when we're doing a show, I have some of those, and we have different colors. Like you notice this right here is one where, like I said, when it starts cracking and stuff, the other color will come through. So we have some with different colors. So I've thought, rather than if I had them all this natural color, they wouldn't be standing there looking through them as much. So they have time to think about, well, am I going to get one or not? They're looking at all these colors. Here, so anyway, once this is, Ethan now is screwing on the top and hold that up there so it'll come out like that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is run this neck. Like I said, this hole here is the same width as the neck is, or it was a little bit wider and a little bit deeper. So, and I just run that in there. Now, important thing right here, you want this to be lined up back here, straight across, because if you had this at an angle, of course, it's not going to work. So it's lined up here, and the strings are going to go through the back here and come through here and string up that way. A lot of times mandolins will have a little tailpiece on the end that will attach here, and then you'll hook the strings in that way. So I just found it, I thought it was pretty neat. Just go ahead and use that lip that's on the back of it there. All right, like I said, he's going to attach that top, and then once we attach those, the top, like I said, we've drilled out for the keys here, and then it strings up, and the bridge, like I said, this bridge has to be from this middle point. It's exactly the same distance as there, and that's very, very important. Like I said, the hardest part of these is getting it to actually where your notes are in tune, which forms a scale. And then, oh, the height. This is very important too. If you had a bridge on here where if this was too high, it's going to bring these strings off the neck too far. So this neck is actually 3/16 high. And by having, here you'll see where the string runs across through those slots, across that, goes down. And by this being just a hair higher than this is what creates that. Because say if this was the same height as this, these strings would be laying basically on top of the frets like that, and which would be just a wooden sound. So that creates that up like that. Another thing, the thickness of this neck. I have tried these using a little bit thinner wood for the neck, and what happens, the pressure on the tension on the strings will cause this neck to kind of bend, like where I don't have. Now this part here is not going to bend because, as y'all know, laminate, anything laminate is much stronger than the solid wood a lot of times. So that part's strong, but if the part that goes into the banjo is not laminated, so you want a thick enough material to where when you put those strings on there, it's not going to bend that there. And like I said, what causes it, if it bends, what happens is strings, they become too high up like that. Well, like I said, the 5/8 material is really good to use. All right, and then the stringing it up, the bait, if you notice on this, the bass string is on the very top. Now I think
the biggest string, thickest string.
The thickest string. Now I think on Hans's, I'll have to take a look, but if you're holding his dulcimer like this, the bass string is on
The middle.
well, if you're just holding it up like this, I think it would be on the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah. So on a dulcimer, the bass string would be here. But the reason I switched this over, it's just easier to play it when it's up like this with the bass on top, because most stringed instruments, guitar, mandolin, dobro, most of these stringed instruments, the bass is on the top and it's not on the bottom.
Okay.
And like I said, the dulcimer music still works the same way. All right, let's see. We have, let me go over the parts. Like I said, I have the keys here that are attached with the screws on the back. The neck, which has the laminate material here, the same size really as the top. And like I said, if you weren't making a lot of these, of course you can use fancier woods and really have a nice one. Because people ask me sometimes, like, well, do you ever make one with higher grade woods? And I really haven't yet, but I've got a guy, he says, I want to place an order for like using a solid top and like a maple neck. If you know, I was going to show you this here. This is another thrift shop find where it's like a wooden salad bowl.
Those are blade holders.
And what I did is it had like the bottom of it was kind of rotten or busted out or something. So I just took and cut that off, and I have the same thing as the top here. So a lot of times if you're walking through a store, and I have made these out of plastic things, they're not hardly as loud. Like I said, the copper is the best if you can find it, if you won't do that. Now, here's something that I had seen, some gourd banjos. Well, this is a gourd, that's cut in half. So if you had a gourd, you could actually get two out of one, because they're cut in half, and then the neck part is here. Gorjo or Gordlin. Now, I am going to try some sound hose on the next one I make of this, because if you notice this top, this is not the same material as this. A friend of mine had gave me some, this is actually a cedar top that's solid wood, because on the tops of guitars you have spruce is probably the most popular. I think Hans has a dulcimer over there with spruce on the top, and then there's cedar. It has more metal sound. Some people use mahogany, but mostly mahogany is a side and back kind of deal. But anyway, so I was like, well, I'm going to try one of these using that cedar So this is solid top. And with the sound hose, I think it would sound better here, but I'll play you a little bit on the. So, and the scale is the same thing as this. Notice how on this one, the bridge will come about along in here. But since this gourd is actually a little bit smaller here, the bridge is going to come back farther because I want to maintain that 13 3/4 there. I have made some using a little bit smaller scale. You can go online and get templates for longer ones if you want to. Like on the guitar, the size on the guitar is 24.5 from the nut here to the bridge. So 24, and then the guitar can be different sizes. It can be a little bit bigger, a little bit shorter, but it maintains that 24 there.
Where's your hole on that one? Is it next to the neck?
Well, this one actually,
Does not have a hole.
it has a little bit here, but I haven't. I have done one time. I thought about, and I tried this on something. This I have thought about when Hans mentioned about this. I've thought about to where I like Irish music, and you know, if you go, I've the little Celtic design. A lot of times you see with the different vines and the clovers and all that. If you scrolled this out to where it had all those designs in that, and either you can leave it where it's sound hose or have a little backing in there. If it like let out too much sound, I guess you could have some kind of backing on the back side of that. So there's a lot of possibilities with that top. And with something like this, actually, you could actually, you know, have some, like what I call elf hose here, where the designs on that with the scroll saw. This is still the cedar neck, and I think this was actually oak.
What do you mean by a solid top on that one, sir?
Okay, if you notice the edge, if you maybe zoom in right here, you'll notice where
This is plywood.
that's like 3 or.
This is plywood, and that's a solid piece of wood.
If you notice here, it's just one piece. And usually on a musical instrument, solid top will always much better sounding. One thing that would hurt the solid sound on this is the way I have the neck where it runs through the top of actually the neck is.
The vibration is not doing the whole time.
Yes, right. So that's one of the drawbacks. So really on this type of instrument, the solid top is not really going to benefit you that much. Because when it gets into the one thing with a solid top, the reason they can use solid top, I don't know if y'all had a guitar maker in here before, where it has braces on the top of it to where it makes it stronger, where the pressure of the string cannot push it down. So I guess, and then also the neck is dovetailed in to where, you know, it doesn't have that bar running across. And like I said, all that just leads to more. And like I said, that's so many people that come by our booth would say, you know what, we're not going to buy one of those. We're going to try to make one of those. And I was like, if it inspires somebody to make them. But my biggest thing for making these was inspire people, little kids, to get involved in music. Because like I said, by profession, I'm a music teacher. And when I first started playing guitar when I was 8, but several years before that, my dad kept a guitar underneath the bed that he had got at a poo hall before he was married. There was somebody that was needing some money, and so he gave him $15 for this guitar. And every now and then he'd bring it out and show it to us and tell us the Jacksonville story. But then he'd keep it under the bed, so I knew where he'd keep it. So I'd crawl up under the bed and just, you know, run my fingers over the strings. And I thought, well, that's a cool thing right there. And so as time goes on, you know, Daddy would drag me out and say, you know, I started doing lessons, And now when little kids will come by, and the thing they do, they'll have their fingers, which we give them a pick, you know, they'll take and just do that over and over and over. You know, just that sound is just amazing to them. And then a lot of times, you know, I'll kind of show some of them how to, you know, where to put their fingers and everything. And they'll go, oh no, they just want to, they'll be like, oh, I can make up my, yeah, Hans is like, I'll just make up my own song. Because that's the one thing with this where, if I just randomly move, the way this is scaled and the way it's tuned, you could go, I mean, it just kind of naturally, it doesn't really, no matter where you put your fingers,
You're just strumming the whole thing, but you're only touching one.
That's right.
one key.
And they call it a drone, and that's what dulcimer works also, where if I'm playing, the other ones are staying open. Now if I get more intricate in it, where I can individually play on the, where I'm just hitting it that way.
Basically, any kind of band will work.
Any kind of pan work, if most of this one, we passed around, it's a little bit smaller pan. Let me see if it's tuned up here. So you can, there. And this one is going to Hans because later on in the program he has a little something planned for this one.
Okay.
And like I said, that's a pan that I bought at a thrift store. Like I said, I pay the 88 cents for the new pans, but sometimes at the thrift store, kind of $1 is my thing. It's like I want to find a pan, like if it's $1 and low, you know, I want to go with that just because I think it's fun trying to make something like that. And if you notice this pan right here,
He was holding out.
oh yeah, you had a question
I was
earlier.
just gonna ask, what strings are you using? Are they guitar or not?
They're the first 3 strings of a guitar.
And like I said, it's tuned DAD, but if you was to go into a music store and say, you know, I need the first 3 strings of guitar, that actually is the E, B, and the G, they would know what to give you. As far as the gauges on them, it's like a .012, .017, and then a .024. But the first 3. And let's see here.
The first 3, you talking about the first 3 in the bottom or the top?
The bottom.
So that's an interesting question, because a lot of times we're given lessons because they'll say, well, so, what, do you think of the bottom being the bottom bass or the bottom height, here? But it's like more toward the floor. It would be like the thinnest, the next to thinnest, and the third. So, let's see if y'all can think of any more questions, because like I said, this is, the whole percenting thing's kind of new to me also. I teach guitar, but usually it's one-on-one.
What's the lesson cost?
18 for 30 minutes. And usually people pay by the month, but like I said, I've done some group lessons, but I've found with music lessons, one-on-one is definitely the best, because I don't care if you take 2, 3, 4 people, they're all going to move at a little bit different speeds. So with one-on-one, we can go with their speeds. So what happens is when you put the string in there, I pull it all the way through, and I want to wind about from here to there, like that much, so like a little over an inch. I pull that back, bend it up, and that's how much I wind on there. Then the excess, you will cut off the excess.
But leave a 1/4 of an inch sticking out to where it does not come through the hole.
Yeah, but anyway, so basically.
But sometimes you have to weave them through bigger pans, and in this one you had to come from way down there, so you can just about do it on anything.
And in this one we put it all the way through and drilled a hole.
Yeah,
through
that's
it.
a good point. Where that's the neck there that's actually sticking out from beyond it a little bit. Well, Hans, I'll turn it back over to you.
So he's got these for sale if anybody wants them. Any other questions? Well, I appreciate you coming tonight and doing this, and it's something I think we can all do.